boys and girls. It's Mrs. Bolton back at West Elementary, back to share the second read for this story, Apples, Apples Everywhere, learning about apple harvest. I love that cover. So remember, boys and girls, when I read to you, the read for the second time will be different. You're going to have new vocabulary words. You're going to have new things that I ask you to look and listen for. And then, of course, I'm going to ask you different questions. The questions I ask you the second time will cause you to think a little deeper, a little harder. And we're going to get started. We're going to get started with today's special words. But if you'll notice, I've added the words from our first read. They're up on the board over my shoulder. We see ripe, meaning that they're ready to be picked and eaten. We have harvest, which means to gather or to collect. And the word tart, which we learned means soured or sour, not sweet. We talked about how usually people think of those green Granny Smith apples as being tart. So the first word I want you to look and listen for today, boys and girls, is the word bruised. Bruised. Can you say that word? Good. Bruised. Can you spell it with me? B-R-U-I-S-E-D. Bruised. Now, the E-D is a special part of that word that lets us know that it has, whatever this is, it has already happened. Something was bruised. Your leg may have gotten bruised yesterday when you fell, but this ED means it happened in the past. Could have been 5 minutes ago, could have been 5 days, 5 years, 500 years. It has already happened. Bruised means to be discolored, leading to rot. So in the first read, we heard the farmer caution the girl about dropping the apple because it would bruise easily. That means where it hit, it would become discolored, and that would lead to it rotting. So I'm going to add bruised to our vocabulary chart, and we're going to look and listen to see how that's used in the story. I think I just told you, but we'll still listen. The next word is rot. Can you spell it with me? R-O-T, rot, rot. Yes, rot means to turn bad, to spoil. And we know the farmer cautioned against that when the girl nearly dropped her apple in the story. Can you think of some other things that could rot or spoil? Milk can go bad. If you leave meat out, most foods, if they're left out of the refrigerator long enough, could spoil. They could rot. Sure. And the next word I want you to listen and look for is the word sag. 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 Can you spell that with me? S-A-G. Good. Sag means to hang low, usually due to weight. So in the story, the apple trees were described as sagging. So we're going to talk about, when we get to that part of the story, what caused that to happen. So let's get started. The story is called, excuse me, Apples, Apples Everywhere, learning about apple harvest. The story is written by Robin Kuntz. That means she wrote the word. And it is illustrated by Nadine Takborian. That means she drew these beautiful pictures. Plants are turning brown. The air smells fresh. It feels chilly. They're saying, it's not summer anymore. Time to pick apples. Wow, look at all the apples. Welcome to our harvest. At the apple orchard, trees sag with ripe fruit. So there's that word, sag. So What is in those apples to make them heavy enough for those tree branches to sag? What's in those apples that make them heavy? That's right, juice, and that juice is mostly water. Apples come in shades of red, yellow, or green. Apples can be as small as a cherry, or they can be as big as a grapefruit. Wow, that one's huge. I got it. So what's one way apples can be different? The color. What else? Good, you're a great listener. The size, very good. In the orchard, people are busy picking and packing apples. Fruit ladders help workers reach apples high in the tall trees. We need a lot of help in autumn. Remember, that's another name for fall. We could eat some of those. I don't think that's what the lady has in mind. So why are the workers having to climb the ladders and pick the apples by hand? Why can't they just shake the tree and let the fruit fall to the ground? Very good, you are a great listener. That's right, if they hit the ground, they will bruise, and we know once they're bruised, that makes them rot a lot faster. And the farmer's saying, don't drop that apple. An apple rots quickly if it's bruised. Workers put apples in boxes. It's best to store apples in a cool place. We learned that from the story Johnny Appleseed, didn't we? Settlers would dig holes under their homes or into the side of hills by their home, and they would make little storage areas that stayed cool underground and store their apples. Apple worms live inside some apples, but apple worms really are moth caterpillars. The caterpillars eat the seeds and the fruit. Later, they squirm their way out. What's worse than finding a worm in your apple? Finding half a worm. Yuck! Where did the other half of that apple worm or that moth caterpillar go? She ate it. She bit it in half and she ate it. Yuck. Some apples taste tart. That means not sweet. They're soured. People like to use those for baking pies. I like the sour ones. Pucker up. Remember when your mouth draws up when you eat something sour, whether it's an apple, lemon, whatever it may be, your lips purse or they curl up. We call that puckering. They pucker. Sweet, crunchy apples are best for munching. Apples can be used for games too. Let's bob for apples. We can bob for apples because they float. Now we learned that to bob for apples, you put your hands behind your back and you try to grab the apples out with your teeth. Is this a game we would play right now? When everyone is socially distancing and trying not to get sick? Why wouldn't this be a game you would want to play now? Yeah, because you're putting your mouth into the same water, and that's just not clean. That really wouldn't have been clean even before COVID-19. Cider is made from apples. First, the fruit is crushed. Then the apple juice pours down into a bucket and out into a container. What's that sweet smell? It's apple cider. Boys and girls, do you remember the name of this device that I told you squeezes that juice out? Great. It's called a press because it presses the juice out of the apple. Now, when apples are sent to these big factories where apple juice is bottled and sent to grocery stores, or they're making applesauce, whatever it may be, they have huge machines that press the apples because there are millions of apples going through there. And this little machine would not be able to press that many. So let me ask you something. If they're pressing this juice out of those apples, do you think the apple would weigh more before it is pressed or after it is pressed? What do you think? Yes, it would weigh more before it's pressed because it still has all the juice in it, all that water in it. And remember from before, that's really what makes an apple heavy. It's all of that juice inside, just like a watermelon. Watermelons are so heavy, and it's because they're mostly water. People have harvested apples for thousands of years. It's fun to celebrate the apple harvest with others. And there are some of those wonderful apple goodies that we learned even with the story Johnny Appleseed that have been made with apples over hundreds of years. Pies, cider, they put caramel on some apples. Yeah, there's so many things you can make. You know, we have so many apple trees now. Do you think it's possible that some of the apples we have now could have come from some of those trees that Johnny Appleseed planted? Maybe. How would that even be possible? Good, because those seeds are saved and they're dried, and year after year after year, those seeds get planted and more trees grow. And then those seeds get dried and saved and planted and more trees grow. And that just keeps going and going and going. So, sure, I think it's possible. Very possible. So I hope you enjoyed the second read of Apples, Apples Everywhere, learning about apple harvest. Did you hear our special words for today? Did you hear the word bruised? The farmer was saying, don't drop that apple. And we learned it's because they'll bruise easily. And once they're bruised, that discoloration leads to them rotting pretty quickly. And did you hear the word rot? That means to turn bad or to spoil. And once the apples have rot in them, they have a rotten spot on them, you wouldn't want to eat that rotten spot because that might make you sick. It might make you sick at your tummy. And what about the word sag? I told you to listen and to think about there at the beginning of the story, what was making those apple tree branches so heavy that they were sagging? And we learned that what's making them hang low is all of the juice in the apples. When they get ripe, they're so full of juice, mostly water, that it makes them really heavy, and the branches of the trees just sag with the weight of those apples. Yeah. So boys and girls, I hope you've enjoyed both reads of our story, Apples, Apples Everywhere, learning about apple harvest. And hopefully it taught you a great story about how things are grown in a field somewhere, in this case in an orchard, and then they are harvested and taken to factories to have things made from them like cider or jelly or little frozen pies, or they're taken straight to a grocery store where they're put on display and we take them home and we eat them as apples. But it's a great way to learn about how we go from something growing in a field to it being in our home and us eating it. So boys and girls, until the next time, this is Mrs. Bolton. I'll be seeing you.